There's multiple threads of things which we do to become. You know, you can't just sit there and do nothing. So we activate something by engaging it. And so that happened in lots of different ways. So when I first started to engage, you know, I wanted the gates of my spirit, soul, and body open. And so I focused on that. And I engaged it relationally with Jesus, walked through it. He showed me stuff. That all got outworked, you know, and then everything was flowing and everything seemed great. But I didn't really understand it. I just sort of had these experiences. Then I go into a whole different other level with it. So I think it was at the point where rivers of living water are flowing in from my innermost being. So they're flowing from heaven into me, which is really the spirit. I mean, you know, when we talk about living waters, Jesus referred to it as a spirit. So I have life in me. So life is flowing. Well, where's it going? So then eventually it was like, oh, this life is around me. It didn't want to be contained in me. It needs to expand around me. So I looked at expanding my spirit and therefore life, rivers of living water flowing. Well, where's it going to flow? If it just flows in you, you're just going to get filled up until you burst. So it's got to flow out of you. Well, how did that work? I don't know. I didn't know at the time. So I just chose, well, I'm choosing the reality that this is going to be around me. So I'm expanding my spirit around me. How do I do that? Well, I don't know. I just choose to do it. And therefore the river can flow into a wider sphere. Then I expanded it around all my spheres until I learned about how my spirit, soul, and body meet in the core of my being, because my innermost being is not my spirit. I used to think, oh, my innermost being is my spirit, because that's where God dwells, and it flows from my spirit to my soul, through my body, to the world around me. But I didn't understand energy gates. I didn't understand the core of my being, my innermost being a Merkaba, which is a connection point to multiple dimensions and realities. And that actually activates the energy gates within me, which is actually what dissipates around me. So I wasn't very effective at doing it because I didn't know how to do it. I just chose to do it because that seemed the right thing to do, but I didn't really know how. Then I learned how. So it went from, well, I got spirit, soul, body gates to I got an innermost being, which activates these gates, because the body gates I used to think about were the ear gate and the eye gate and the nose gate and the mouth gate. And they were senses. They were the physical senses, the 5 physical senses. But we've got 7 energy gates that are designed to interact with the spiritual, physical, and inner world. The heart gate, the root gate, which is connecting to creation, the crown gate, which is connecting to the spiritual realm, the heavenly realms. All of these things, the creative gate, all of these things, I had no idea about when I started. So I started learning about the spirit gates, soul gates, body gates, and sort of going through all that process, but eventually realized there was so much more to that. Now, if God had started to tell me about Merkabas and energy gates back in 2010, I would have been like, no way, Jose, am I going to accept that? But as things developed, then it became easier to accept the reality of all these things, and now I live in them. And I think that's true of everything. You start off engaging, and you practice, and you engage, and you train, and things increase, and then things develop. So I think for most people, they don't start off at the end, do they? They start off at the beginning, and then they go on a journey to get somewhere. And that's really what it's like. And I guess everyone's journey will be different. And the things that they learn, or the sort of terminology they use for their journey, will be different. But eventually it's bringing us to a place of enlightenment where we know the reality of who we are, having practiced and trained. You know, I used to practice training my senses to discern. Well, then I learned to discern. I could discern. I didn't need to practice training my senses. The same with my brain waves and alpha and beta and theta and gamma waves and all that stuff. I practiced going from beta to alpha. So I slow down and meditate. Well, now I live in a state of meditation, if you like, where all those brain waves are active. So I can draw on spiritual, soul, creativity. I can draw on the answers to the solutions without having to think about them. But sometimes I quite like sorting out a problem. You know, I'm a problem solver. I like overcoming things in a practical sense. I like fixing things, making things work, making things. So I like some of the actually using my beta waves in my brain to solve problems. But there comes a point where I don't know how to solve this problem, so I can draw on my creative alpha wave state. And if I don't have that and in there, I can draw on my delta wave state, and then I can draw on theta waves, and I can draw on the spirit for creativity. You know, and so I didn't know any of that when I first started trying to train my senses to discern. I didn't know how to do any of it, but I just kept going, and then enlightenment came, and truth came, and revelation came, and I discovered it was way more complicated than I ever thought, but way more simple than I ever thought also. Because it is, when you're just being, you don't have to think about it. Like driving, I don't think about driving. I just drive because I'm a driver.